was fairly new in 2005. I feel like I gotta sneeze. Oh, goodness. Knew it. G'day folks, Jordan here, today with a Palm Pilot video. Now, I don't have a fancy Palm Pilot to show you all today, but I hope that this video is interesting to watch nonetheless. And hopefully, if there's enough interest, I'll actually make a part 2 of where I'll actually see if I can source out some extra stuff for this little PDA to where we can make a more interesting video. But for right now, we're going to mainly take a look at the hardware and the basic software load that one of these things actually comes with. Today we're looking at a Palm Z22 from about 2005. Now this thing is about as basic as a Palm Pilot really gets. This thing retailed new for $100, whereas many of the more fully featured PDAs probably cost upwards of $300 to $400, maybe even more expensive than that. And of course, this was the mid-2000s. Now, at this time, smartphones were becoming a thing. However, smartphones were also exorbitantly expensive as well. And really the only major benefits that you got in the case of a smartphone was you could have the functionality of a PDA, maybe given a couple extra features than your normal PDA would have had, such as, your mobile data capabilities and obviously, calling and texting and mobile web and stuff like that. But of course you had to pay exorbitant pricing for one of those sorts of things. Well, what if you were the more basic, bare bones kind of person who just wanted a PDA and the functionality of a PDA, but they didn't really care about all of the amenities necessarily? Well, this would have been the device for you, to put it that way. Now, my apologies for the interesting camera angle here. I wanted to set my camera down so I could talk about the specifications of the Z22. So the Z22 is fairly small and petite by today's standards. Of course, with our extra large smartphones like the iPhone XS Max and the XL sizes of Google Pixels or the Galaxy Note 9 or something like that. This thing is very small. In fact, it's 2.7 inches wide, or in this case, maybe the height, I don't know what you would call, by 4.1 inches long by 0.6 inches deep. Quite a petite little device. In fact, it is so lightweight, it's like 3.5 ounces. It's pretty impressive at what they were able to fit inside of this thing. And one notable review about this was talking about how it had a little bit of an Apple-esque look to it. Well, they weren't joking. It actually sort of has like its translucent back. On the back, you can kind of see the construction here, which has its sort of like plastic clips and pretty well shows you how you could probably take this thing apart in case you needed to do something on the inside. I don't know how often you want to do that, but hey, the feature is there. Now, with that small size came small specifications. This thing featured a 200 megahertz system on a chip, presumably a system on a chip, because of course this is a PDA after all. The SoC in particular is the Samsung S3C2410A, and the only reason why I know which one it actually is because I actually did an Easter egg on the Z22 where I held down the center button on the D-pad, or the four-way directional thing here, when I was turning it on, and it went into a special download mode, which is very interesting. Now, the S3C2410A is essentially an ARM-based chip, which is based on a 32-bit RISC architecture, which is very interesting. You can read the whole data sheet up online if you wanted to look up the particular chip, but it runs at 200 megahertz. I don't know how much memory it has, or if it combines with the non-perishable stuff. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But anyway, that also was used in this thing's predecessor, which would have been the Palm Zyre 31. And with that, you don't really need much power. So this thing really gets some good battery life. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And to go along with the small size comes a small display. Now, I'll go ahead and I'll briefly show this here, but this has a 4096 color, which is probably like 12-bit or something like that. I can't tell you what that would mean. 160 by 160 color passive matrix display. I'm serious, it's passive matrix. and it's 1:1 display ratio. Now, I don't know the pixel density numbers off the top of my head, but the screen is pretty small, and the resolution is quite small too, so the pixel density number will be down there, right, as you can see, and you can all laugh at how much better our modern smartphone displays are. But back in the day, again, this is as bare bones as you got. You really didn't care too much about the display resolution being a retina display or something like that. Maybe the higher end PDAs, but even then the technology really wasn't all that advanced back in the day. I mean, when the iPhone came out and displays were like 160 pixels per inch, man, that was pretty advanced stuff back in the day. Nowadays we have pixels that are so incredibly small that we can make 4K displays in the size of our hand. Pretty impressive stuff, honestly. Now, with the small size came some other compromises, such as the lack of Wi-Fi, the lack of Bluetooth, the lack of sound. So this thing only has a little piezo beeper in it. It also does not have expandable storage. There is no SD card slot on this thing anywhere. Literally what you see is what you get, essentially, which is pretty insane for something like this to not have expandable storage. I guess for the price it kind of makes sense, but I mean, you're paying $100 for something, you kind of want an expandable storage, but I guess for people who were buying this thing, they really didn't care. The only real kind of connectivity on this thing is the micro B USB port right up here at the top, alongside the infrared data transfer beams. Now, with the lack of everything that you see there, it doesn't have things like MP3 playback, video playback, and web browsing, and all sorts of the fancy amenities that many PDAs from the day had. But you could still play games, you could still do many things with this device, like, reading PDFs and ebooks, and doing Office tasks on the go, like editing a Microsoft Office document, like a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, that sort of stuff. You could do that on the go. And really that's what this thing was made for, was doing basic PDA things such as that. And maybe the occasional game of Bejeweled on the go if you were really bored. So I mean, it did have its functionality, it did have its uses for sure, but it was by no means a fully featured PDA. Now, when this thing was new, it did come with a CD full of software that you could have installed on this thing on your first boot up of the PDA when you were obviously setting it up for the first time. And it also came with a couple of games, a couple of useful programs, such as the Documents to Go suite, which allowed you to, obviously open up your Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel files on the go. And it wasn't just Windows as well. This actually had some Macintosh support, because back in the day, Palm had a pretty big sponsorship in Apple, and they made everything super duper easy, especially back in the days of early Mac OS X. Man, it was so simple and it looked really, really good. But a lot of people in 2005 or 2006, because again, this was pretty much the rising era of the smartphone, this thing pretty much seemed redundant. And a lot of reviews talked about how the smartphone could easily do what the Z22 can do and more, and you really wouldn't be paying too much more to get those things. But the catch was you had to pay more for it. And not everybody wanted a smartphone, say. They didn't want to deal with an expensive data plan. They didn't want the smartphone that had so many features that many people just didn't know what to do with. And to keep that in, context, that's kind of sort of the thing that modern smartphones have nowadays. I think they're starting to trim that down a little bit because they kind of realize that people aren't buying into that BS. But I digress. This thing was for people who wanted a PDA, but they didn't want to have to pay for things like another cell phone plan on top of, having a device that could do everything they really wanted it to do. So, I mean, this kind of made perfect sense, kind of. I mean, really, if you think about it, I don't know. I wasn't back in the day crazy about PDAs because I was like 6 years old back in the day. So, my little pea brain couldn't do too terribly much. I mean, hell, I was crazy about 2006. I'm serious. But I digress. This thing, it came out, it did its thing, and it did it pretty well. And in fact, it even got a PC Magazine Editor's Choice because the bare bones PDA functionality that this thing did, it did well. And the battery life was pretty good while it was doing it too. You could use this thing back in the day for roughly 8.5 hours straight. And the standby time on these things, of course, is incredible because their CPUs are so low powered that these things, they just lasted on a charge for days upon days on end. Basically, you could think of this as having iPad battery life, but almost. Because everything was just so low powered and there wasn't as many intensive things to do on one of these things like a more modern iPad or tablet. So these things just did their job and they did it well, and their price was respectable. It wasn't for everybody, but what it did do, it did fairly well, and that's really all that mattered, I suppose. So very quickly, we're going to go ahead and get into the basic things. I'm not going to go too crazy in this because I don't have any additional software on this to demonstrate for a video, but what this thing came with was basically the basics. You got yourself a calendar, contacts, memos, notepads, tasks, that sort of stuff. This is just your basic PDA software load. And so I'm not going to go too crazy into showing everything off because that would take about 10 minutes, not really worth many people's time. So really the only thing that's worth kind of showing is, well, the notepad functionality, which, whoop-de-doo, right? So, I mean, there's that. But I am going to say, if you want me to load up some additional software on this thing for a later demonstration of this particular PDA, let me know down below in the comments section, because I'd be more than happy to do like one of those Draga 1 style video compilation things where I will try to download the software that's needed to make one of these things shine. But no guarantees though. In addition, I have to track down like the drivers and the hot-sync software. And not that that's the end of the world. I could more than certainly look that stuff up and make it into a great big hour-long video, more than likely, which would be kind of funny. But yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much going to wrap up, at least for now, this Palm Z22 overview video. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the like button. I know it wasn't much of a video, but it's mainly just a hardware overview video. I didn't have too much software to put on this thing, so understandably so, it probably wasn't that interesting. But even if you liked it anyway, give it a like. If you want to see more content like this one, don't forget to subscribe. You know, you don't have to click the bell icon. I don't upload too frequently, so you don't have to go nuts about clicking the bell icon. I just appreciate the subscription. That's really what matters most to me. And with that having been said, I'm going to get out of here. So, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.